There's an interview that we've been working to bring you. The subject of that interview has both an extremely complicated and an extremely busy schedule, so we're extremely grateful that she was able to carve out a little bit of time to sit down and have a short chat with us about the current state of Alberta politics. So, without further ado, we're very proud to present a short conversation with the most senior member of the Alberta Legislature, the current MLA for Edmonton Strathcona, the former Premier of Alberta, and the leader of the current opposition in the Alberta Legislature, Rachel Notley. So, if it's okay, we'll just kind of jump right in.
Sure.
And go through there. So, first of all, I want to thank you very much for appearing on our little program today. Very much appreciated. I'd like to start with a bit of a serious question. We'll do some word association. So if I was, you grew up in Northern Alberta.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was to say the words Main Street, Fairview, and ping pong balls, what does that bring to mind for you?
Ping pong balls. Wasn't that some kind of shopping thing? That was like, it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, I've been looking for somebody else who can remember that for like 30 years. They used to drop ping pong balls down Main Street. They did it out of a helicopter and a plane, and I think a couple times out of a big truck.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, perfect. Okay, good. To get into some of the things that I want to talk about today, you were first elected in 2008 to the legislature. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Perfect. So you've been around for quite some time in that building.
I have, although I will say it's quite weird because I am in fact the most senior person in the house in terms of how long I've been there. Not the oldest, just put that out there. But in fact, the one that's been elected the longest, except when I was elected in 2008, it was crazy because they were constantly giving out 15, 20-year pins to people, right? On the Conservative side, there was a whole swack of them that had been there forever. And now that I am, I guess it's been it's been a little over 12 years that I've been there. The fact that I am the most senior person there goes to, I think, speak to a lot of the volatility and the changes in our political culture. But yeah, 12 years.
With that being said, and especially, I didn't realize that you were the most senior member, so this adds an extra layer of context. One of the concerns that a lot of people have been expressing is the overall tone in the legislature. One of Mr. Kenney's promises in the last election was that he was going to restore decorum to the legislature, and between using the windows of the legislature as billboards, as well as the behavior that's going on inside of the legislature, it's one of the concerns that I have is that it's very easy to go, this is the worst I've ever seen it, but it's very easy to be in the moment. So as somebody who's been in the legislature for going on almost 13 years now, is it that bad, and have you seen it worse?
Yeah, so lots of stuff that's sort of embedded in that question. I would say that it's in some ways it's better. Let me just say this, compared to 2008, because the opposition is stronger. And I think that's good for government. And that actually, in some ways, didn't start with us. I mean, the world rose strangely when the Conservatives split. The group that came up, that sort of severed off of them, had the confidence, I guess, of having been in government. Bear in mind, the rest of us were all sort of looking at this government that was 40 years old. And they kind of were pretty punchy and strong opposition. I would argue that we are also a strong opposition. So to the extent that you want to see the government really take held to account, I would argue that in some ways it's a bit better. However, there's lots of ways to argue that it's nowhere nearly as good. And I would argue that is mostly because the UCP has used its majority. So they've done sort of superficial things, and they've said, you can't pound on the desks anymore. Well, that's lovely. But at the same time, they then use their majority to completely rewrite the standing orders, which historically were done in all party committees, where there was quite a lot of work put into getting consensus on all the members first. Maybe you didn't fully get consensus, but there was quite a lot of work put into it, to instead just walking in with the biggest single rewrite of the standing orders ever, never ran it by the opposition. I think they gave us like an hour's notice or something, and then voted it through with by putting closure in the debate. And they completely changed the rules of the House. And so they have exploited their majority in a way that I've never seen before, which undermines the value of the legislature, the parliament, the democratic platform that we've all been elected to operate in. And so that has created a tremendous level of frustration that didn't exist before. The other thing that they have done, which in my experience is brand new, is they just have a profound willingness to lie. And so, whereas I was revisiting with some colleagues about how 8 or 9 years ago, I remember doing this long legalistic challenge, point of privilege, when there was one contradiction that was revealed between the then health minister, James Wadesky, and a leaked document from cabinet. And I did a whole point of privilege because he said something to the legislature that wasn't true. Now it happens about 9 times a day, and nobody it's the speaker doesn't care, and it's just is what it is, and it's unparliamentary to say that someone is lying. The time I did it, when they fired the elections commissioner, I was thrown out of the House. The very fact of firing the elections commissioner, an officer of the legislature, while that person was investigating you, is something that I think is actually unprecedented. It's obviously unprecedented in Alberta, but I think it's actually unprecedented in the Commonwealth. And so it, again, that's a feature of our democratic system, and it was just casually swept away through the abuse of their majority. So with those kinds of things happening, the tone has changed. It's like Trump has arrived in Alberta.
One of the Trump piece, one of the other things that has kind of reared its head a little bit that I can't at least remember ever seeing before in the province of Alberta is the use of issues managers and press secretaries to aggressively go after private citizens who are expressing their opinions on social media. Have you ever seen that level of chill placed on conversation before from official spokespeople or from official members of the government?
That's a really good question. I would tend to say no. Um, all Yeah, I have to be, be perfectly frank with you. I think back, we had issue managers, we had press secretaries. Was there ever a sort of an Ezra Levant-esque kind of person that was saying things on Twitter where people that we had responded to it, and then, and I would say, well, that's different because, Ezra Levant is sort of who he is. But then again, that's very subjective. And so, but I will say, yeah, it does occur to me for sure. We've had situations where I can think of some women on social media who've been quite aggressively attacked by folks. I think of Jillian Ratty, for instance, and you're right. I think they're far more aggressive on it than they have been in the past. I think honestly, the social media sphere, when we were in government as well, the sort of threatening and approach that you sometimes saw against our government from so-called people on social media, and I'm not entirely sure that because a lot of them sort of disappeared when our government disappeared. So the tone has changed. What that really reflects is the importation of the kind of Steve Bannon-esque strategies and tactics that you see south of the border. I think that's what you're seeing. And so I'm sorry, I'm going on in a long way. Like, I like the idea of conversation, and debate. And I will say this, you started beginning talking about Fairview. I grew up in Fairview. As your parents may have told you, my dad actually never won by more than, like, his biggest landslide was when he won by 800 votes. And typically he would win by under 200. So I grew up in an environment of having to sort of defend my dad and defend our politics. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having a good conversation and a good debate about politics and policy. And I think it's healthy. And I will say that when I went away for school and for work, both to Ontario and then to BC, I was happily I was impressed with how much more involved and evolved the political conversation was, and saddened by how unlikely people in Alberta were to engage in conversation. And so I think the growth in political debate in Alberta is actually, although painful, good for our political culture. However, I think we have to remain focused on issues that we are debating, and we have to move away and defend against personal attacks, except in the rarest of cases, because otherwise we're not going to get to the right answers.
With the that in mind, one of the conversations that has sort of happened to the side, and certainly there's been no shortage of larger issues for people to be talking about. But one of the conversations that has been happening to the side is the whole conversation around the tone that this government seems to have taken towards relationships with First Nations people, and as well with truth and reconciliation. We saw this on the beginning of last weekend, where a certain executive issues manager to the premier may have tweeted out a thread that was effectively a denial of the term genocide being used towards First Nations people. That got the hashtag Fire Mount Wolf trending in the #1 position on Saturday night, and that was no small part because of the reaction of First Nations peoples to the statements that he made. Do you think that Matt Wolf and the issues managers and the press secretaries that throw out these incredibly inflammatory comments are doing that as a distractory piece, or is it actually representative of what this government believes?
I think it's both. I think it's both. I think obviously, you go back to the fellow who was appointed to review our curriculum. You look at the fellow who was writing Jason Kenney's speeches. Both of these people have articulated absolutely abhorrent positions when it comes to the history of First Nations people in this country. And so obviously that's inherent in who they are and what they believe. I also think, however, that you are exactly right, that what they are doing is they are playing a game of distraction and division on issues to get people fired up so that they don't think about the thing that's actually really making them angry, which is the fact that they either don't have a job, or if they do have a job, they're not making as much as they once did, or if they have a job and they're worried about losing their job. And Jason Kenney's plan is actually making people's employment stability more precarious. He's making wealthy people more wealthy, and he's generating far more uncertainty for the vast majority of Albertans in terms of their economic security. And he doesn't want people to think about that. And so, because people are angry, and we know that from when we were in government, people in Alberta are going through a generational shift. We in our province have felt that we would always do well because we were a very wealthy, prosperous province, and the majority, not all, we all know that, but the majority of Albertans could find a way to do well. And because of the shift in the way the oil and gas industry works and all the other things, that's not the case anymore. And so people are genuinely angry and frustrated and scared. It was that way when we were in government. It's still that way. What's happening, though, is that Jason Kenney is not addressing that issue front and center. He's not saying, I'm the leader. I know it's my job to make you feel more secure. I know it's my job to make you more secure, and to generate job creation and to do actual economic growth. And so here's what we're going to work on. Instead of doing that, they're throwing stuff out to create false enemies and mostly irrelevant conversations to distract people who are angry and scared. And it's irresponsible.
With that being said, and I know we have only a little bit more time, so I'm going to try to jam a couple of things in quick. But with that being said, one of the frustrations that a lot of people are expressing is the fact that, to some people's perceptions, the UCP is doing very significant damage, not only to the healthcare system through their existing cuts as well as the announced rollbacks to wages, the tone that they've taken with negotiations with physicians. I could go on for a long time, but I think you get the point. Um, One of the questions that people I've seen people asking is this damage reversible? And if so, is does your party have a plan to sort of mitigate all of the damage that not only the UCP have done directly, but the province has experienced because of COVID and the economic downturn, and list and list and list and list?
Well, that's an awfully large question. But yes, I mean, listen, there are a number of things that are challenging Albertans, both external and internal, some of which are within our control, many of which are not within our control. So within that larger context, yes, first of all, you know, I would urge everybody to go to our website, albertasfuture.ca, because there, because I don't have enough time to go through this, but there is actually about a 15-minute speech that I give that gives the large overview of how, what our view is with respect to public services, what our view is with respect to people who are employed in the public service, what our view is with respect to economic recovery, and what our view is with respect to fiscal management, and what the values are that drive all those things. And I would urge people to go to albertasfuture.ca because it is there. That being said, I do believe that there is a way to restabilize and support our public healthcare system, and in fact to improve it, as well as with our education system, as well as with other many important services that our public service provides to Albertans. I do actually think that there's a path forward in terms of economic diversification and ultimately economic growth and prosperity. I will say this though, I do think that the window is starting to close, and there is an opportunity for us to use the resources we still have, which frankly are actually still quite considerable, to stimulate the economy and kickstart the kind of diversification that we have the resources to succeed at. And by resources, I'm referring to human beings. If we look backwards for the next 5 or 10 years, and if we try to recreate Ralph Klein's Alberta from 1993, we will lose the people, the humans that are going to lead our province into the next level and the next stage of economic prosperity. And so we need to focus on people, we need to focus on education, we need to focus on diversification, we need to focus on innovation, and we need to understand that the government has a role to play in all those things. And that is the opposite of what Jason Kenney's doing. And the problem is that the consequence of allowing his backwards looking, I don't mean to say backward in a pejorative way, but backwards looking approach, is that the door closes. And I hear it squeaking close when I watch him continue to try the same old tired strategies that clearly aren't working, and that squeaking close, it's in the back of my brain, and I'm a little worried, and we need to stop that.
Thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. And if you have any recommendations on where to get a good deal on a Bob the Angry Flower t-shirt, I would love an email.
Oh, I will ask Stephen. I haven't seen him do t-shirts in a really long time.
Neither have I. That's why I'm trying to find one.
Oh, okay. I will ask. I will put in a request.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.